It's January 1941, and the United States military is about to make a decision. They'll spend the next 4 years regretting. They're being forced, and I mean literally, forced by congressional law, to train African American pilots for combat duty. The Army Air Corps brass? They're furious. For 20 years, they've published studies, written reports, and presented scientific evidence, claiming that black men lack the mental capacity for modern aerial warfare. Their proof? Skull measurements, intelligence tests designed to fail, reflexes studies conducted under deliberately stressful conditions. The conclusion is always the same. African Americans are biologically unsuited for the cockpit, but Eleanor Roosevelt just took a flight with a black pilot named Chief Anderson. And she's not buying the propaganda anymore. Public Law 18 passes despite every general in the Air Corps voting against it. The law is explicit. Create a Negro flying unit. Train them. Put them in combat aircraft. The military's response? Malicious compliance. They choose Tuskegee, Alabama, deep in the segregated South where Jim Crow laws aren't suggestions. They're enforced with violence. The location isn't random. It's calculated. Rural, isolated, far from northern newspapers that might report sympathetically. If this experiment collapses and everyone in command expects it will, the failure needs to happen quietly. Construction begins on Tuskegee Army Airfield in July 1941. The budget? Bare minimum. The equipment? Cast-offs from other bases. The runway specifications? Shorter than standard because, officially, training aircraft don't require full-length runways. Unofficially, they're betting these pilots won't progress beyond basic trainers. The first class of 13 cadets arrives to find instructors who've been briefed to expect failure rates exceeding 70%. 3 times the washout rate of white cadets. The classrooms are segregated. The barracks are segregated. Even the blood supply is segregated. Black blood can't contaminate white soldiers, according to military policy. Among those first cadets is Captain Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., and his presence is a calculated insult to everyone who thinks this program might succeed. Davis graduated from West Point in 1936, 4 years at the military academy where not one white cadet spoke to him outside of required military protocol. 4 years of eating alone, studying alone, existing in a silence designed to break him psychologically. He didn't break. Now he's leading men into a training program designed with the same goal. Psychological destruction, disguised as military standards, and the military is about to learn that there's a massive difference between wanting someone to fail and making them fail when they refuse to. Quit out the training standards at Tuskegee aren't just strict, they're statistically designed to produce failure. Here's what white cadets at other facilities experience. You fail a check ride, you get a review board, additional instruction, and a second chance, sometimes a third. The military has invested money in your training. They want you to succeed. At Tuskegee, you fail a check ride once, you're eliminated. No review, no second chance. Gone navigation errors that get white cadets remedial map reading courses get black cadets sent home. Engine management mistakes that earn white cadets extra simulator time get black cadets washed out permanently. The check ride examiners aren't even subtle about it. They ask questions that aren't in the training manual. They create emergency scenarios that violate standard procedures. One examiner becomes infamous for cutting a cadet's engine during takeoff, an emergency that's not even trained at this stage, and then failing the cadet for poor emergency response. The physical fitness standards are equally rigged. White cadets run timed obstacle courses in the morning when temperatures are cool. Tuskegee cadets run theirs at noon in Alabama summer heat, where the temperature hits 105 degrees and the humidity makes breathing feel like drowning. Fail the obstacle course time? Eliminated, no retake. The academic testing follows the same pattern. Questions are ambiguous. Time limits are shortened. Grading standards shift depending on who's taking the test. A white cadet who scores 72% passes. A black cadet who scores 72% needs remedial work. Score below 70% a second time? Eliminated. Out of the first 13 cadets, 8 wash out. The newspapers friendly to segregation run headlines celebrating the failure rate. Tuskegee experiment confirms predictions, one Georgia paper declares. The military brass nod knowingly in Washington. This is playing out exactly as they anticipated, but 5 cadets refuse to break. March 7, 1942, and those 5 men earned their silver wings: Benjamin Davis Jr., George Roberts, Mac Ross, Lemuel Custis, and Charles DeBow, the first black military pilots in United States history. The Army Air Corps scrambles to figure out what went wrong with their sabotage. The answer is simple, though they'll never admit it. You can design a system to fail people, but you can't design a system that fails people who are better than the system's expectations. Training continues. More classes arrive. The failure rate stays high, around 45%, but it's not the 70% the military predicted. Every class graduates pilots who shouldn't exist according to 2 decades of military science. By mid-1943, there are enough graduates to form not just a squadron, but an entire fighter group. 4 squadrons, the 99th, 100th, 301st, and 302nd. Together they become the 332nd Fighter Group. Standard fighter group structure: 75 aircraft, 120 pilotes, 800 support personnel, mechanics, crew chiefs, armorers, supply officers, radio technicians. At Tuskegee, every single one of these positions is filled by black personnel. The military has created a completely segregated combat unit, a parallel organization that mirrors white fighter groups in structure, but exists in total isolation. The theory: it will collapse under its own organizational weight once real combat stress is applied. Then comes the equipment assignment, and the contempt becomes impossible to miss. White fighter groups deploying to Europe receive P-47 Thunderbolts, brand new, heavily armored 850 caliber machine guns, top speed 433 mph, or P-38 Lightnings, twin-engine, exceptional climb rate, innovative design. The 332nd Fighter Group receives P-40 Warhawks. The P-40 was cutting-edge technology in 1940. By 1943, it's obsolete. Maximum speed 360 mph, 70 mph slower than German fighters it'll face. Service ceiling 29,000 feet. German fighters routinely operate at 35,000 feet. Climb rate 2,100 feet per minute. German Focke-Wulf 190s climb at 2,600. These aren't just older aircraft. They're mechanically worn, passed down from units that upgraded to better equipment. Engine hours are high. Maintenance logs show recurring problems. This is hand-me-down equipment going into frontline combat. Colonel Davis understands exactly what this means. His pilots will be fighting a modern air force with outdated technology. And when losses occur, not if but when, it will be blamed on pilot incompetence, not equipment deficiency. The pressure is suffocating. Every mission carries double weight.
White pilots are representing themselves.
Black pilots are representing 13 million African Americans who've been systematically told they're inferior. Succeed and you prove nothing. The standards will just shift. Fail once and you prove everything the critics have claimed for decades. In June 1943, the 332nd Fighter Group ships out to North Africa. The impossible experiment is about to face its first real test: combat against the Luftwaffe, and nobody in the military high command expects them to survive it. June 2, 1943. The 99th Fighter Squadron flies its first combat mission over Sicily, and immediately the inadequacy of their equipment becomes violently apparent. The mission is basic escort duty: protect medium bombers hitting Pantelleria. No enemy contact. Just nervous pilots learning what anti-aircraft fire looks like when it's actually trying to kill you. Black smoke bursts at 15,000 feet. Shrapnel pinging off aluminum fuselages. The psychological reality that people below are calculating trajectories to blow you out of the sky. They all make it back. Mission successful. 7 days later, everything changes. June 9th, over the Mediterranean, the squadron encounters Focke-Wulf 190s, Germany's frontline fighter. The engagement lasts maybe 90 seconds. Lieutenant Charles Hall maneuvers his P-40 behind an FW-190, fires a burst and watches the German fighter spiral into the sea trailing smoke. First aerial victory for the unit. Confirmation that black pilots can shoot down enemy aircraft. The celebration lasts approximately 1 day. Because Colonel William Momier, commander of the 33rd Fighter Group, is watching the Tuskegee pilots with a clipboard and predetermined conclusions. He's looking for failure, and on July 2, 1943, he finds what he's looking for. The mission is attacking Castelvetrano airfield in Sicily. The 99th provides top cover while other squadrons strafe ground targets. It's a chaotic operation, Multiple aircraft at low altitude, German fighters scrambling to defend, anti-aircraft fire creating a lethal environment. 12 Messerschmitt Bf-109s dive out of the sun. Classic ambush tactics, the P-40s scatter. In the chaos, 2 aircraft go down. Lieutenant Sherman White is killed instantly when cannon fire tears through his cockpit. Lieutenant James McCullen ejects but lands in enemy territory, prisoner of war. The remaining pilots fight their way out and return to base with bullet holes and traumatized souls. Momier's report lands on desks in Washington within 48 hours. The language is clinical. The implications are devastating. The 99th Fighter Squadron lacks the aggressive spirit necessary for combat operations. Formation discipline is poor. Combat effectiveness is markedly inferior to comparable white squadrons flying similar equipment. His recommendation: remove the 99th from combat operations. Assign them to coastal patrol or reconnaissance, military busy work that keeps them away from real fighting. Time magazine picks up the story. The headline might as well read, "Tuskegee Experiment Fails as Predicted." The article questions whether Negro pilots possess the temperament for aerial combat, citing unnamed military sources who express concerns about the unit's performance. Here's what Momier's report carefully omits. Every P-40 squadron in the Mediterranean is getting destroyed. The 57th Fighter Group, flying P-40s, loses 8 aircraft in July. The 79th Fighter Group loses 6. The 324th Fighter Group loses 7. Across the board, P-40 units are experiencing casualty rates between 4% and 5% per mission. The 99th's loss rate, 3.8%. They're performing better than the average P-40 squadron. But statistics don't matter when you're trying to prove racial inferiority. When white pilots die, it's the unfortunate reality of aerial combat. When black pilots die, it's genetic weakness. Colonel Benjamin O. Davis requests and receives an audience with General Ira Eaker, commander of Mediterranean Allied Air Forces. September 1943. Davis walks into that meeting knowing this might be the last conversation that determines whether black pilots ever fly combat again. He brings documentation, mission logs, loss comparisons, performance data. The 99th has flown 500 sorties. Loss rate 3.8%. Enemy aircraft destroyed 11 confirmed. Comparable white squadrons flying P-40s. Loss rates between 3.5% and 4.2%. Enemy aircraft destroyed, ranging from 8 to 14 statistically. The 99th is average. Not exceptional, not inferior. Average. Eaker doesn't ground them. He doesn't promote Davis on the spot. But he does something unexpected. He approves bringing the entire 332nd Fighter Group to Italy, 4 squadrons instead of 1, and he starts the equipment request for newer aircraft. By late 1943, the strategic reality has shifted. The Army Air Forces is losing bomber crews at unsustainable rates over Germany. B-17 and B-24 formations are getting torn apart by Luftwaffe fighters. The Air Force needs every capable fighter group it can field. The Tuskegee Airmen have proven they can survive. Now they're going to get the chance to prove they can dominate. January 1944. The 332nd arrives at Ramatelli Airfield on Italy's Adriatic coast. Waiting on the flight line are rows of P-47 Thunderbolts, brand new, heavily armored, legitimately modern fighters. The equipment excuse just evaporated. For 2 months they fly P-47's bomber escort, ground attack, fighter sweeps. The pilots love the aircraft's durability. You can take hits that would destroy a P-40 and still make it home. But the 15th Air Force has different plans. May 1944, the transition order arrives. Turn in the P-47s. The 332nd is converting to P-51 Mustangs. Everything is about to change. The P-51B and C Mustangs represent the absolute cutting edge of American fighter technology. Packard-built Rolls-Royce Merlin engines generating 490 horsepower. Cruise speed, 360 mph. Maximum speed, 440 mph. Combat radius with drop tanks, 900 miles. Berlin is suddenly within range from Italian bases, and the 332nd Fighter Group receives new orders that will define their entire legacy. Bomber escort. Primary mission: protect the heavy bombers flying deep into Germany. This is the most politically sensitive assignment in the entire air war, because it puts black pilots directly responsible for protecting white lives. If bombers get shot down while under escort by the 332nd, every racist critic in the military will have permanent ammunition. Colonel Davis gathers his squadron commanders. The briefing is blunt. You will stay with the bombers. You will not chase kills. You will not break formation for personal glory. Your mission is bringing those crews home alive. Nothing else matters. The orders violate every fighter pilot instinct. Aggressive pursuit. Individual initiative. Racking up kill counts that earn medals and promotions. Davis is ordering his pilots to become invisible guardians. Stay close. Stay disciplined. Let glory go to someone else. And then he makes one more decision that will become legendary. Paint the tail assemblies bright red. Every aircraft, entire vertical stabilizer, fire engine red visible from miles away. The official reason, easy identification for bomber crews. The real reason, branding. If they're going to succeed or fail, everyone will know exactly who was flying escort. Those red tails become operational June 7, 1944. The nickname follows within weeks. Red Tail Angels. The bomber crews give them that name. Not the military, not the press. The men whose lives depend on those escorts staying in formation. And the record they're about to build will force America to confront everything it believes about race and capability. Between June 1944 and April 1945, the 332nd Fighter Group flies approximately 200 bomber escort missions. The number of heavy bombers lost to enemy fighters while under their direct protection. 0, not very few, not lower than average. 0, that statistical impossibility requires understanding how they engineered success through tactics that other fighter groups considered beneath them. Standard doctrine across the Army Air Forces teaches fighter pilots that their primary mission is air superiority. Shoot down enemy aircraft. Establish dominance. Bomber escort is treated as secondary duty. Important, but not as important as kill counts. The tactical manuals explicitly encourage fighters to break formation and pursue enemy aircraft when opportunities arise. Kills equal medals. Medals equal promotions. Staying with bombers equals boring missions that don't advance your career. By March 1944, the numbers are catastrophic. 8th Air Force bombers flying from England lose an average of 46 bombers per 1,000 sorties. That's a 4.6% loss rate. Crews need to complete 25 missions for a full tour. Do the math. Your statistical chance of surviving is roughly 1 in 3. The 15th Air Force in Italy isn't better. Loss rates hover around 3.8%, which still means entire squadrons are being replaced every few months. The Luftwaffe has figured out American tactics. German fighter commanders know P-47s and P-51s will chase them if presented with tempting targets, so they use small decoy formations. 4 or 5 Bf-109s flying provocatively near the bomber stream. The American escorts take the bait and pursue. Then larger German formations attack the now vulnerable bombers from different angles. It works horrifyingly well. March 6, 1944, 69 heavy bombers lost over Berlin. March 8th, another 37 shot down. WWII. Escorts are racking up impressive kill counts while the bombers they're supposed to protect are burning. Colonel Davis reads these after-action reports and recognizes an opportunity. His group is already under intense scrutiny. Every mission analyzed, every mistake magnified. That pressure is meant to break them. But it also means he can't hide behind the excuses white fighter groups use when bombers die. If the 332nd loses bombers while chasing glory kills, the experiment ends immediately. But if his pilots can protect bombers better than white groups by simply staying where they're supposed to be, that becomes undeniable proof of competence. The doctrine Davis implements sounds simple: stay with the bombers. No exceptions. The execution is brutally complex. Standard escort doctrine has fighters flying in a loose screen, wide formations at various altitudes, generally covering the area around bombers. The 332nd flies what Davis calls close escort, fighters within 50 yards of the bomber formations, close enough that bomber crews can see the pilots' faces through the cockpit glass. When bombers turn, the escorts turn with them. When bombers climb, escorts climb in formation. The red tails maintain position like they're welded to the bomber formation. This requires exhausting discipline. You're flying formation on 300-foot wingspan B-17s for 6 to 8 hours. Constant attention. Constant tiny stick corrections. No autopilot, no relaxation. Your right hand stays on the stick. Left hand manages throttle and mixture. Feet work rudder pedals. Head swivels continuously. Checking 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Scanning for threats. Do this for 7 hours at 25,000 feet in sub-zero temperatures while breathing oxygen through a mask, and you'll understand why most fighter pilots prefer the freedom of independent sweeps. The tactical implementation is methodical. 4 squadrons rotate positions throughout each mission. High cover flies 2,000 feet above the bombers, watching for diving attacks. Low cover sits 1,000 feet below, countering the Luftwaffe's favorite tactic of attacking from underneath where bombers have weakest defensive fire. 2 side squadrons bracket the formation, intercepting any fighter trying beam attacks through the bomber stream. Every 15 minutes, the squadrons rotate. High cover drops to low. Low rotates to right flank. Right moves to left. Left climbs to high cover. This serves 2 purposes. Prevents fatigue from keeping one squadron in the most dangerous position all mission, and makes the defense unpredictable. German fighter controllers tracking these formations can't identify sustained weak points because the positions constantly shift. It's exhausting. Every rotation requires precise timing and communication, but it works. The engagement rules are brutally clear. You only pursue if you can maintain visual contact with the bombers. German pilots quickly learn the red tails won't chase, so they adapt tactics. Bf-109s make feint attacks pulling away before gun range, trying to draw escorts out of position. It doesn't work. FW-190s try high-speed diving attacks from 30,000 feet. The high cover intercepts them on the way down. Me-410 heavy fighters attempt standoff attacks using 210mm rockets. The escorts stay tight, forcing the rocket carriers to fire from ineffective distances where hitting a maneuvering bomber is nearly impossible. April 1944 becomes the proving ground. Bucharest, Ploesti, Vienna, Munich. Every major strategic target in range. April 12th, mission to the Steyr ball bearing plant. German fighters make multiple attack runs. The red tails intercept every approach. 3 Bf-109s shot down. 0 bombers lost. April 15th, Ploesti. Same result. April 24th. April 26th. May 5th. Mission after mission, the pattern holds. The 332nd isn't chasing kills deep into Germany. They're doing something more valuable, making bomber crews believe they might actually survive this war. By summer 1944, something unprecedented starts happening. Bomber crews request the 332nd by name. Mission planners for heavy bombardment groups specifically ask whether the red tails are available for high-risk targets. This drives some white fighter group commanders absolutely insane. Colonel Hub Zemke of the 479th Fighter Group files a formal complaint that bomber crews are showing preference for Negro pilots, implying it reflects poorly on white fighter groups. The complaint goes nowhere. The 15th Air Force Command looks at the loss statistics and shrugs. If bomber crews feel safer with the 332nd, maybe other fighter groups should start wondering why. The reputation creates psychological warfare on multiple levels. German fighter pilots monitoring. Allied radio frequencies hear bomber crews talking about the red tails. Luftwaffe intelligence briefs its pilots. These are Negro pilots who fly unusually tight formations and won't abandon the bombers. Some German pilots don't believe black pilots exist. They assume it's propaganda. Others learn during failed attack runs that get intercepted by Mustangs that refuse to leave their stations. The red tails become a tactical warning. If you see them, the bombers will be harder to hit because the escorts won't give chase. By early 1945, the numbers are impossible to dismiss. The 332nd has flown 179 bomber escort missions without losing a bomber to enemy fighters. Compare this to other 15th Air Force Group's 31st Fighter Group. Averages 2.3 bombers lost per 100 escort missions. 52nd Fighter Group. Averages 2.1 bombers lost. 25th Fighter Group. Averages 1.9 bombers lost. These aren't incompetent units. They're experienced groups with excellent pilots flying the same P-51s. The difference is doctrine, and the proof is in the loss sheets. March 24, 1945 delivers the mission that cements the legend forever. The target, Daimler-Benz tank, works in Berlin. Over 600 miles from Ramitelli, maximum range for WWII P-51s, defended by whatever remains of the Luftwaffe's strength. The 332nd puts up 59 fighters escorting B-17s from the 5th Bombardment Wing. Near the target, approximately 25 Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighters attack the formation. The Me-262 is the world's first operational jet fighter. It flies 100 mph faster than a P-51. Conventional wisdom says piston engine fighters can't touch jets. The Red Tails don't try to chase them. They position themselves between the jets and the bombers, forcing the Me-262s to maneuver for attack positions. In the swirling engagement, 3 jets go down. Captain Roscoe Brown gets one. Lieutenant Earl Lane gets another. Second Lieutenant Charles Brantley bags the third. Every bomber comes home. The mission report circulates through every bomber base in Italy. The story gets embellished. Some versions claim 6 jets shot down. But the truth is impressive enough. In the war's final months, against Germany's most advanced aircraft flown by experienced pilots, the 332nd protected every bomber and shot down 3 jets while maintaining formation. The myth and reality merge into something bomber crews can believe in. If the Red Tails are with you, you're coming home. By April 1945, that zero-loss record isn't just statistics. It's reputation, mythology, and tactical reality blended into something that changes how both sides fight. Allied bombers fly with greater confidence when they see Red Tails. German fighters approach those formations with greater caution. And sitting in cockpits at 25,000 feet, black pilots who've been told their entire lives they're inferior are proving every single day that excellence isn't about skin color. It's about discipline, doctrine, and refusing to quit. May 8, 1945, Germany surrenders. The 332nd Fighter Group returns to the United States with a combat record that nobody can dispute and nobody wants to publicly celebrate. Final statistics: 1,578 combat missions flown, 112 enemy aircraft destroyed in air combat, another 150 destroyed on the ground, 1 destroyer sunk with machine gun fire. Yes, they strafed a naval vessel to death. 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses awarded, and that bomber loss record, officially recognized as the lowest rate in the entire 15th Air Force. The mathematical proof is irrefutable. Black pilots not only performed adequately, they performed better than the majority of white fighter groups given the same mission. America in 1945 isn't ready for that conversation. There are no ticker tape parades for the 302nd. No national radio broadcasts celebrating their achievements. The white press extensively covers other fighter aces while largely ignoring the Tuskegee Airmen. Colonel Benjamin O. Davis Jr. receives the Silver Star, a high honor. But he doesn't get promoted to Brigadier General until 1954. 9 years after the war ends, white officers with less distinguished records pin on stars within months of returning home. The Tuskegee Airmen return to an America where they can't eat in the same restaurants as the bomber crews they protected, can't drink from the same water fountains, can't live in the same neighborhoods, can't vote in the states where they trained. They fought 2 wars simultaneously, one against Nazi Germany, one against the racism of their own country. They won the first war definitively. The second war is just beginning, but the record itself becomes a weapon in the civil rights arsenal. When segregationists claim black soldiers performed poorly in World War II, civil rights advocates point to the 332nd. The statistics don't lie. The bomber crews who survived because of red tail protection don't lie. When military planners argue against integration in 1947, they have to explain why the most effective bomber escort group in the Mediterranean theater was all black. The answer gets increasingly uncomfortable. Maybe the segregationists were wrong. Maybe the scientific studies were fraudulent. Maybe racial superiority is a myth designed to justify oppression. President Harry Truman signs Executive Order 9981 in July 1948, mandating integration of the armed forces. The Tuskegee Airmen's record is part of the evidence stack that makes continued segregation indefensible. You can't claim a race is inferior when they've demonstrated superior performance under the most objective measurements possible: combat effectiveness and mission success rates. The tactical doctrine they pioneered becomes standard training within a decade. The stay with the bombers principle that Colonel Davis fought to implement becomes official Air Force policy. During the Korean War, modern fighter doctrine for escort missions emphasizes maintaining position with protected assets rather than pursuing individual kills. exactly what the 332nd practiced in 1944. The F-15 Eagle's development in the 1970s includes specific design requirements for long-range escort capability, directly influenced by lessons learned from World War II bomber protection. The Tuskegee Airmen's tactics outlived the prejudices that tried to prevent them from flying. The Hollywood recognition takes decades to arrive. 1995, HBO releases The Tuskegee Airmen. The movie introduces millions of Americans to a story that was deliberately excluded from history textbooks for 50 years. 2012, Red Tails brings the story to theatrical release. It has historical simplifications and compressed timelines, but it accomplishes something vital. It forces the American narrative about World War II to include the men who were systematically erased. Schools that never mentioned black pilots suddenly have curriculum about the Tuskegee Airmen. Veterans groups that ignored them for decades invite them to speak at commemorations. The survivors become living connections to a history the nation tried to forget. Lieutenant Colonel George Hardy, who flew 21 missions with the 332nd, attends air shows into his 90s. He tells crowds about fighting 2 wars simultaneously, one against Germans, one against the racism of his own military. Brigadier General Charles McGee flies 409 combat missions across 3 wars. World War II, Korea, Vietnam. He becomes the visible face of the Tuskegee legacy, speaking at military academies about the doctrine that saved lives. These men don't claim they were perfect. They claim they were given an impossible standard and met it through discipline when natural talent alone would have failed. The final institutional recognition comes in 2007. President George W. Bush awards the Congressional Gold Medal collectively to the Tuskegee Airmen. Approximately 300 survivors attend the ceremony. Old men in their 80s and 90s, many in wheelchairs, some requiring oxygen, all wearing distinctive red blazers. Bush's remarks acknowledge what the government denied for 60 years. These men were subjected to a double standard. They performed beyond it, and they changed the military forever. The medal doesn't erase the discrimination they faced. It doesn't compensate for decades of denial and erasure. But it's official recognition that their service mattered, that their record stands, that they were right, and the system that tried to destroy them was wrong. Today, the Air Force trains every pilot on case studies that include the 332nd Fighter Group's escort doctrine. The precision, discipline, and mission focus they demonstrated become teaching examples at Squadron Officer School and Fighter Weapons School. When modern fighter pilots discuss close air support or protected asset escort, they're implementing tactical principles refined under fire by men who weren't supposed to be capable of flying at all. The Tuskegee Airmen didn't just prove they could fly. They proved they could innovate, adapt doctrine, and execute with a level of discipline that set new standards for everyone who followed. They started with hand-me-down P-40s and a military establishment that wanted them to fail. They ended by rewriting the textbook on bomber escort tactics and forcing America to confront its own lies about racial inferiority. The red tails became more than identification markers. They became proof that excellence isn't genetic. It's trained. It's disciplined. It's earned through refusing to accept the limitations that others try to impose. And every pilot who flies today, regardless of race, gender, or background, benefits from the path they forced open through sheer competence and unbreakable will. The Tuskegee Airmen prove that when you tell someone they can't and they do it anyway, they don't just succeed for themselves. They open the door for everyone who comes after.